Well, the issue of foreign workers in Australia is again making headlines. This time, unions have savaged the government's decision to let foreign workers help to build Gina Rinehart's multi-billion-dollar iron ore project in Western Australia. Well, for more, we're joined by Skills Minister Chris Evans from Perth. Minister, welcome to you. Can I start with that particular issue? What justification does the government have of bringing those foreign workers into the country?
Well, we always bring foreign workers into the country to help with skill shortages or peaks in activity. And the reality is over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to have a massive peak in construction workforce requirements. And it's about making sure that, as well as skilling Australians, to meet this peak, we bring in some temporary workers to match the demand at a very high demand period.
But you must have realised that this would upset certainly the unions and more broadly workers when some or many are losing their jobs.
Well, look, we've got at any one time about 100,000 temporary workers in the country. We've always relied on them, as I say, to meet skill shortages or peak demand. And the reality is that we try and make sure that we train Australians first. Australians will get the first crack at any job opportunities coming from this mining boom. But it also is the fact that we're going to need some assistance. We're not going to be able to fill all the jobs locally. And this example is a classic where they're going to need 8,000 people at one time, and the provision for up to 1,700 or so workers has been put into an agreement. But they have to be paid Australian wages and conditions. Australians have to get the first opportunities, and they only come in if we can't meet the demand for labour from within Australia.
Can you confirm that this decision was made without consulting the Prime Minister?
No, look, the policy around the EMAs was agreed by Cabinet, and it's been our policy for some time. This is just the announcement of the first agreement that's been negotiated, and the Minister made that announcement. So it's obviously a big one. I think some of the others won't be as large. But the reality is we're going to have a peak demand for construction workforce. We won't be able to fill all of it from Australian labour, and we're going to need some assistance. But as I say, these arrangements are just a formalisation of the 457 schemes. We've had up to 120, 130,000 people in the country at various times. It dropped during the global financial crisis. It's on the rise again now. It's about balancing local training, skilling Australians first, and meeting these peak demands.
But this project involving Gina Rinehart's mine was always going to be very political, given the nature of who she is and this open warfare between the government and the likes of Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer. Given that, should the Prime Minister not have had the final say, or at least made the decision herself?
Well, I reject any suggestion that we would have discriminated against a Gina Rinehart-owned business. The reality, this is about a public policy decision. It's a good policy which makes sure we meet the needs of the economy during a peak period, but also give Australian workers the first opportunity to skill up and take those jobs. It would be quite inappropriate for the government to try and discriminate against particular employers. So obviously it's controversial given the controversies around Gina Rinehart, but quite frankly it would have been the wrong thing to do to somehow discriminate against her or her companies.
Do you expect some vigorous debate in caucus? We've already heard the likes of Senator Doug Cameron saying that this is a fairly outrageous decision.
Well, look, I know there'll be some controversy around this, but the reality is we can either bring people in temporarily to deal with a peak, or these projects won't go ahead. These projects deliver jobs and income and wealth to Australia. There's a lot of them occurring at once, which is a management challenge for us. And what we're trying to do is manage the peak. Those workers will come in when needed and go home. We won't be left with high unemployment if they were to be made permanent immigrants. We're just trying to deal with the challenge of making sure these projects do get off the ground, because they will employ Australians for 10s and 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Chris Evans, can I ask you to put your other hat on, that of Science Minister? And of course, overnight we've heard the news that Australia will share the location for the world's most powerful radio telescope with South Africa. Is that a win, particularly given that we were expecting that it would either be one or the other?
Look, it's a fantastic result for Australia. It's a win-win for us, New Zealand and South Africa. But this is probably better than winning the World Soccer Cup This is going to be a benefit to Australia for 50 or 60 years. It's going to drive science, research, innovation, and have a lot of industrial applications. So being part of the world's largest scientific project is going to be a real boom for Australia.
What does it mean, though, specifically for Australia, when, as I mentioned, it will be split, and as I understand it, South Africa will get the bulk of the large antenna, if you like, whereas Australia will get the smaller of that set. Is that a concession?
No, look, this is about playing to our strengths. The South Africans will get the higher frequency arrays and we'll do the lower frequency arrays. The reality is we've made a huge investment in the Pathfinder project in the Murchison of Western Australia already. That stood us in good stead, if you like. This investment will build on that. We'll use the technology already invested and we'll specialise at the lower frequency end. But the capital build's going to be huge and the ongoing science is going to be just amazing. This is a super science project. It'll have spin-offs into many areas, and for instance the computing will require a supercomputer 100 times larger than anything exists at the moment. So the scientific challenge and spin-offs will be massive.
As you mentioned, the capital spend will be huge. Given the project will be shared between two continents, there is speculation that will raise the cost significantly.
Well, it's important to understand that the partner countries, which we think will be around 20 when the arrangements are finalised, will share the cost. This isn't about Australia paying for it, this is about us paying a share, a host country contribution, but it's an international project. The decision's been made that a dual site can work and that we can build off the strengths of South African science and Australian science, and that we can actually get better results for the dual investment. So that's a decision that's been taken. It's a great decision for Australia. We weren't all that hopeful a month or so ago, but we're now in a position where, as a dual site option, it's a win-win result, and the implications for Australian science and the innovation and application industry that'll come from that is just fantastic.
Senator Chris Evans, thanks very much.
My pleasure.